Hi everyone, welcome to lesson number 4 of our subject, 21st Century from the Philippines and the World. Before we start, before anything else, of course we have to check on you guys if we have learned something from our previous lesson, which is the different literary genres of the 21st century. So we have lots, but we only discussed the 14 basic ones. So kindly go to kahoot.it and then enter the game pin. So you will see on your screen this page on the right side. So it will look like this. So just kindly enter in the pin code. So the numbers on the screen that I'm showing you, enter it here on this side. Okay. So if you're done, maybe a few minutes will do. And then after answering this, then you can go back to this video. And then you may now proceed and continue watching this. So assuming that you have finished your game, and I'm hoping that you got a perfect score and you did not cheat. So for today's lesson, you are expected to do 3 things. So first one, you're expected to identify words, ideas, structure, and purpose of the text. Secondly, explore the different social and socio-cultural contexts to enhance and enrich the understanding of the text. And third, appreciate the importance of understanding the literary context and its meaning to one's own life experiences. So we will be learning the 4 different contexts and the meanings that they apply to a text. And you're also expected at the end of our lesson for your activity, you're going to write your own poetry applying these different contexts. Specifically, the first one, which is author's context, because you are going to be the author of your own work. Okay, so if you have your modules with you, you can turn in on page 30. So let's now discuss what are the 4 different contexts. Okay, so let me just adjust the size. All right, so we have it here now. So again, if you have your module with you, it's just on page 30. So when we say context, this originates from the notion of weaving together. It is defined as the circumstances that form the setting of events, statements, or ideas, and in the way of which it can be fully understood and assessed. Reading a literary piece may contribute to the production of the author and the reception of the reader as they appreciate and explore. Okay, so in simpler terms, when we say context, okay, it's actually the condition in which the text is created. It also means that a text could be understood in different ways. Okay, we have different contexts. So originally, a text is based on, of course, how the author wanted to be understood by the readers. And secondly, the readers also have their own context on how would they react and understand the text that they read. So we have the 4 different contexts. So the first one, this is what we call writer's context. So this is knowing about the writer's life, values, assumptions, gender, race, sexual orientation, and the political and economic issues related to the author. So this is everything about the author. So let's use, for an example, Noli Me Tangere by Jose Rizal. So we know the author, right? So he is our national hero. And we all know, since he's very famous, we all know his background. Therefore, we could grasp, okay, an idea of his works and where he is coming from. So basically, his work is about nationalism. Why? Because during his time, we all know that That's the period wherein Filipinos are fighting for their freedom from the Spaniards. So that's basically how writer's context works. So this is anything about and anything related to the author. Influences that we can get from a writer's context is his religious beliefs. So that's one, his nationality, okay, his attitude, and other important things relating to his work. Another example would be Twilight. So I hope you are all familiar with the movie and the book entitled Twilight. So Stephanie Meyer, who is the author of that particular work, we can say that she's really fond of romance genre, love stories, happily ever after, with a mixture of fiction, magic. So the next one is, we call it the reader's context. So if the first one is about the author himself or herself, then the next one is all about the reader's previous reading experience, values, assumptions, political and economic issues. So now the message of a literary work, a literary piece, varies now also depending on how the reader views it. So for example, I'm trying to read Jose Rizal's No Limitang Heret. And for example, I am a Spanish woman. So of course, I would have a different view of the work. Okay, instead of understanding the work as a nationalistic themed literature, I might think of it as something that encourages rebellion among people. Okay, and other things. So that's because I came from a different background. So that's how the readers work. Third one, the text context. So this is now the text itself. Of course, we couldn't remove. Of course, we couldn't separate the author's view from his work. Okay, but of course, the text itself speaks for himself or for her. But of course, the text speaks for itself. So this is a part of the larger text, such as newspaper, history, events, and other translations in it. So the text itself, whatever category it belongs to, it speaks for its own message. Again, we can use the example stated here, just like a newspaper. Although it is written by a specific person, we know its main objective, and that is to inform, and that is, of course, should be based on facts. So it doesn't matter if a person reading it doesn't believe on what it says, because a newspaper is basically based on truth, and that's the main reason for having it published. So it must be proofread, it must be error-free, although sometimes there are errors, of course, and it must be something reliable to the public eye. And lastly, we have what we call social context and social cultural of a text. So this features the society in which the characters live and in which the author's text was produced. Okay, so this one is somewhat related to the first one because it also talks about the author's background. But specifically, this is about the society, about the economic status during the text was published, so during when the writer was writing the text. So these are particular aspect or one of the aspects of a writer's context. So there you go. So again, we have the 4 different contexts for us to fully understand the message of literary pieces or literature. So the first one is the writer's context, secondly, reader's context, third, the text itself, and lastly, the social context or the socio-cultural of a text. Okay, so moving on. Relating to those contexts, we also have what we call imagery. So this one is part of a literary piece, so it could be seen from any type of literature, most commonly among poems. So imagery is actually used to create a picture in the reader's mind by using words that appeal to the senses. So when you read a word and it targets or it affects your senses, meaning that word is an imagery. And this add effect to the text. So we have three types of imagery. So first one is the visual imagery, second auditory, and the third one is kinesthetic. The visual imagery here produced by the use of words that appeal to the sense of sight. So from the word visual. Okay, so it targets our vision. So when you read the word and you start imagining it or seeing it, although you're just reading it, then that's visual imagery. So for example, when I say, what a beautiful woman. Okay, so we start imagining a really pretty woman who looks like Marian Rivera for local. For Hollywood stars, we could use Megan Fox. I don't know, do you know her? Okay, and another example would be pertaining to colors. So when I say a red bag, so we start imagining a bag which is color red. So it really appeals to our sense of sight. Okay, so that's it. And other words that, so many words that we can use to make the readers see what we are trying to describe in our text. So this one is very, very strong. So the second one, auditory imagery. So this is produced by the use of words that appeal to the sense of hearing. Okay, so the same thing goes. Now an example would be loud noise. Okay, so we're like, we can actually think of something which is noisy, particularly students, for example, in a classroom or when you're in a marketplace. So those places tells us or gives us the feeling like, you know, it hits our auditory senses. So another example is a crying baby. Okay, so we could automatically imagine a baby crying. Okay, third one, kinesthetic. So this one now appeals to the actions and movement and also the sense of touch. Okay, so we can say a slow turtle. Okay, so imagine how slow that is, just like our internet connection. So what else? In movement, something very, very, for example, sharp, a sharp knife. Okay, so when you read a text that goes like, Don Juan sliced his wrist using a very sharp knife, for example. Okay, so we're gonna like cringe at that scene. Okay, we can imagine how sharp the knife is and at the same time feel like the pain that Don Juan is experiencing at the moment. So this is the power of imagery. Okay, so this is also part of what we call a literary technique, or sometimes this is also part of literary devices, okay, because this amplifies the whole text. So it gives enough impact to the reader to understand, to fully relate to the texts that they are reading. So imagine a text without imagery. So it would be totally boring. It will not appeal to the reader. It would not make us read the text at all. Okay, but with adding so much imagery into it, of course, it will bring the text into life. So it will make us read for it, and then read more and more, and also talk about it to our friends. So this one is a really good literary device that you should use, okay, as you write your own text. Okay, so an additional literary technique here is what we call flashback. So this is where the events have taken place before the present time, the narration is following. Okay, so we won't be using this, okay, but it's important that you take note of this because flashback is also one of an effect used by the author when telling stories, especially novels and short stories. Okay, so now let's try to answer one activity. Of course, you can answer some on your own notebook, and you can check your answers as well. I mentioned about having the answer key at the end of the module. Okay, so let's try answering this. So let's find or let's get the text meaning. So since we're going to do this, again, people have different contexts, okay, or understanding of a literary piece. But then we'll try to get the basic interpretation, which is very common to everyone. Okay, so let's start reading Earnest Wish, okay, by Lydia S. Villanueva. I will count the multitude of stars, the leaves in all the branches, the flock of birds perched in the loft, the blades of grass in the meadow, and the common flowers in the air. I will listen to the sound of breeze, to the rustling of leaves, to the chirping of birds, to the buzzing of the trees, to the buzzing of the bees, to the flapping of butterflies' wings. I will tend the garden, rearrange the stones in the pile, weed the grass in the field, harvest the fruits in season, and do again all of these. Let us bring the frontliners back home, fight the unforeseen enemy, help the new beginning, contribute to the humanity, flatten the curve, stay at home. Earnest Wish by Lydia S. Villanueva. Okay, so you can reread it again at your own pace for you to fully understand what the text means. Okay, so from this part, the last stanza, I guess you can see that this poem right here is really up to date and very timely. Okay, such words as flatten the curve, stay at home, then frontliners. Okay, so this poem here is very, very new. Okay, so let's first answer the first question. Of course, I'm giving you enough time to understand it on your own. Okay, this is just a sample activity that we are going to answer all together. So first question, a multitude gathered along with Wan Chai district in Hong Kong to protest the new policy there and to call to ban some products. Thousands of protesters were arrested. So are you familiar with this news? So this is before COVID spread all throughout the world. So this is actually happening before COVID in Hong Kong. So multitude in this sentence means, so what's the answer? Okay, so without checking the dictionary, we can base our answer from the first stanza, the second line, count the multitude of stars. So what should we count? Can you count the stars? So meaning multitude here suggests that something is great in number. Okay, so the answer is letter B. So multitude means a great number of people. Marami. Okay, not just some, not just a few, but really a great number. Just like the stars, just like your hair, just like the grain of rice. Okay, so those could be used for multitude. So next one, in the poem, Earnest Wish, okay, the title, identify the words that suggest the meaning of the word multitude. So I think we just did that for number 1. That's why we came up with the letter B as our answer. Okay, so because we use the word stars as a reference for the word multitude. So there you go. So next, third, the author used imagery in the poem, such as visual, auditory, and kinesthetic imagery. So write the words that suggest visual imagery, auditory, and kinesthetic. So first, we talked about visual imagery earlier. So when we say visual imagery again, it appeals to our sense of sight. So can you name some words here from the poem that appeals to our sense of sight? Okay, so we can use the stars here. So imagine the color of the stars, how it blinks at night. Okay, what else? Okay, can you see others? Again, you can answer on your own. Okay. So next, for auditory. So what are the words that appeal to our sense of hearing? So we have here the rustling of the leaves, the chirping of birds, and the buzzing of the bees. Okay, so imagine removing these words. It's just to the leaves, to the birds. So it's kind of boring, right? So that's the importance of using imagery. Okay, lastly for kinesthetic, again, this is, it pertains to the movement. So we can use the flapping. Okay, yung parang pag close and open ng wings of a butterfly. So that's flapping. Remember Flappy Bird, right? So the wings flap like it goes up and down for someone to be able to fly. Okay, next one is to rearrange there and the blades of grass. Okay, harvest. So imagine the movement here. Okay, flatten the curve also, and then stay at home. So that's actually an action. Okay, so number 4, discuss the structure of the poem, the stanza, lines, rhyme, scheme. Okay, so structure refers to how the poem or how the text is written. So it could refer to the language, okay, the words used. So we can say that the words used here are not really all unfamiliar. So they are common terms that a grade 12 student could really understand. So words were simple, yet appealing to the readers because of the imagery used. So that now refers to the structure. Okay, also for the stanza, okay, so the poem consists of 4 stanzas, which is also a common type of poetry. So usually the basic way of writing a poetry or a poem is including only 3 to 4 lines. Okay, so that's the basic. That's the minimum actually. Okay, and of course it's different from haiku or the shortest poem from Japanese. And then for the rhyme scheme, okay, do you see some? Do you notice words at the end of the line that rhymes all together? Okay, so not most of them rhymes, right? So for example, for the first line, of course, I will here, although I will is repeated for 3 times in a row, except for the last one, which also implies something of a story going on in the poetry. So I will, so it just starts within yourself, and then at the end, it's like you're now encouraging everyone to work with you or to do the same. Okay, and again, going back to the rhymes, they don't rhyme at all. Okay, not as a whole, only some. Okay, for the second stanza. So breeze, leaves, birds, bees, wings. Okay, although they all sounded like they all end with a long E sound and then Z or S. Okay, for that. Still, they don't have the same number of syllables. Okay, although they vary from 6 to 9 syllables per line. So we couldn't consider this as a measured or a metered one. Okay, we can consider it as a free verse poetry. Okay, so the same goes with the rest of the two stanzas. Okay, so number 5. Discuss how the author presented the ideas of the poem up to the point where the message was presented. So I hope I have also mentioned a little bit of the whole message and how it was presented. So again, notice the I will from the very first line of each stanza. I will, and then for the last one, it became let us. So see the development here. So it's like you're just wishing for your own self, for your own thoughts at the beginning. And then you're talking about how wonderful is our nature, describing our natural resources made by God, right? Naturally. And then at the end, the poem now talks about the frontliners. Okay, so this also implies or tells us that this one is written during the pandemic times. Okay, so this poem wasn't written back in 2018, 2019. So this is very, very fresh. So it has only been written this year during the pandemic. Okay, so that's it. And it's like it's telling us that for us to achieve or to see again, hear again, feel again the wonders of nature, for us to count again the stars and to appreciate the bees, the trees, the leaves. So what's the answer to that? All we have to do is we have to stay home to flatten the curve, to help bring back the old normal in our lives and help the frontliners. Okay, so see the development of the message of the poem. So this one is an earnest wish. Okay, so for you to, or for us to be able to achieve or to make our earnest wish to happen, so the answer to that is, again, we go back to the final stanza. Okay, so by staying at home, by flattening the curve, so this is the only way for us to achieve our dream of going back to our normal lives again. Okay, so that's it. So what we just did is just an example of how we interpret the whole poem, parts by parts. Okay, so notice the questions. You have to take note of the questions which we have answered. Okay, the first question actually refers to the structure of the poem, the words used, the vocabulary, which is very important. Okay, using simple terms, we can really understand a text. Okay, so thanks to Miss Lydia S. Villanueva, she did not use highfalutin words or, words that are really, really hard to decipher. Because if that happened, then you will not be able to understand or interpret her text. Okay, so that's how we do it. And then the next question, it also talks about the words again, how the poem was written. Okay, thirdly, okay, same thing goes, and then fourth, the structure still, and then 5, okay, the message. Okay, so that is how you analyze a poem. So when I ask you to do activities, even if it's not a poem, so everything applies for all literary texts. So even if it's a novel or a short story, you will do the same. So you have to analyze the whole text based on the words used, okay, how it was written, the time or the setting that the author is writing it. Okay, in our case, since we do not know Miss Lydia Villanueva, okay, we couldn't really say something about how she wrote it or how she wanted the text to be read. So we do not have that strong idea on how the author wanted to be read. Okay, so what we only did is we used such context as the reader's context, okay, the socio-cultural context, and the text itself. Okay, so we did not use any author's context because we do not know Lydia yet. Okay, except when we Google her bio, okay, when you know her personally, then we can really say something about how she wanted to be read or how she wanted for the text to appear to all the readers. Okay, but based from the text, we're just going to assume, we're just going to guess. Okay, maybe Lydia is a frontliner. Okay, we do not know. Maybe she's part of the health, maybe she's part of a team that services for the health of humanity. So we do not know that. Okay, we're just assuming because her poem is like a tribute to all frontliners. Okay, she could also be a aside from being a nurse, a doctor, she could also be a teacher. Okay, or simply a soldier who is also a frontliner. Okay, so we could think of these things, or simply a student or a farmer who wants to go out again. Okay, so those are just guesses, again, based on how the text was written. Okay, so that's how we apply the different contexts. Okay, so you see, applying those different contexts will help us understand fully what is the text all about. And it will also help us appreciate the text itself. Okay, did it make any sense to you after reading it? So did you appreciate it? Okay, so I hope you did. So that's it. Okay, so we still have here some activities, especially this one. See, so Lydia Villanueva here was introduced. Okay, so we're not going to read this anymore. So you can read this on your own and then understand. Okay, and knowing her background, again, you can have another point of view of her work. Okay, you can now add more ideas on how you would understand the text. Kaya pala ganito yung text because she's a so on and so forth. Okay, so there. Okay, so this part, you can answer this, but not all. Okay, I mean, you can answer them, all of them on your notebook, but for your activity sheets, which I'm going to give you a grade, I am going to post again a new set of questions, okay, which will also be coming from this module. Okay, so kindly wait for it. And then when you see my post on our Google Classroom, you can submit there your work. Okay, so that's it for today. And again, we did not discuss everything because that's for your self-study. And we're expecting you to do some extra readings and discipline yourself on how to manage your own time at home. Okay, and I hope that you are still doing your tasks even though we do not see you. Okay, so that's it again. That's all for the context and text meaning. I hope that you have learned a thing or two. Okay, if you have some questions and clarifications, you can just contact me personally. Okay, you can also comment on my posts if you have more queries related to our topic. Okay, so that's it for today. So I will add no more and I'll just communicate with you if necessary. Okay, so thank you everyone and God bless. Have a nice day.